Call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Today is Thursday, January 4th at 6 p.m. Our first order of business, the invocation. Mr. Root, could you lead us in the invocation?
Mr. Pearson.
Sorry.
I'd like to say something beforehand, if I could. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. I've been here 8 years. There's been ups and downs, arguments. At this time in my life, I guess you'd say, I've got other priorities. And not that I'm leaving the county and not still doing county stuff, but I just feel that I need to be somewhere else. And I'm going to miss every one of you guys because y'all have done a great job. Y'all worked with me, put up with me. I know I'm not easy to put up with most of the time, and I appreciate every single one of you for what y'all have done. But as of 6:02, I am officially resigning from the Planning Commission. And I will let y'all take over. I know y'all can do a good job. Just remember, you're working for the citizens of this county. And they come first, regardless of anything else. It's been fun. 8 years has seemed like it's went by real fast. But I think I've done all I can do at this point. And I think y'all guys can take it from here and carry on and do a good job. I will be around. If you need me, if you got questions, I know a lot of people. I mean, I'll be happy to either call them and get the answers or give you the number if I can remember it and let you call them. But I'll help in any way possible because this is my county. Y'all have a good one.
I will. And Frankie, thank you for your service. Now, pray with me if you'd like to. Dearest Father, I just want to take a special time now to ask for a blessing upon this Planning Commission and Mr. Pearson as he's left. They do important work, thankless work, a work that is often right in the crosshairs in this county. Just property rights are a big issue, an important issue. So I pray you would bless them with just clarity and focus and all the things they need to do their job, but also just well-being and prosperity, guidance, and your love. I pray this meeting would go according to your order, and in your name I pray. Amen.
Mr. Don, will you do some pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next order of business is the election of officers. We will start with the chair, and we will set nominations at this time.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mr. Mike Johnson as chairman.
I'll accept that.
I'd like to nominate Gary Gollin.
Any other nominations? Hearing none? Say anything before we call the vote?
Can we hear a little campaign speech or something from each one of the candidates? Why they want that job?
Yeah, open, if you'd like to say something, or if you have any.
I'm interested in what you have to say, Mike. I always thought you were busy and
With the news of Frankie leaving here, I guess I'm the senior most person in here in the room as far as being on the Planning Commission. I also think that 2024, we're about to go into a big undertaking as far as development standards and as far as some of this additional zoning type stuff. And I've got some level of background or fairly close to it with an understanding of it. So I think I bring those two things to the table. Also, if you'll vote for me, I'll take 2 more steps over so you won't get my scratchy throat.
Okay, well, I've served, for 3 years now, and this will be my last year serving possibly. And I think one of the biggest things we've got to take care of next year is going to be very time demanding with our update for the comprehensive plan. I happen to be retired. James will probably be seeing a lot more of me if I am elected chair. I think I've got the organizational skills to serve well in that capacity, and I hope that you'll all vote for me. Thank you.
All right, we'll call for the vote. We will start with Mr. Johnson. All those like to vote?
Do I get to vote for myself?
Yes. You don't have to. C4. And for Mr. Collin? It's 2. Mr. Johnson, congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, thank you. All right.
That's over for
So it'll be the
It's the
vice
same,
chair
I think.
and secretary.
Okay.
It's a split screen.
So my job is then to set up the vice chair to,
Calling the election for the vice chair
Okay.
and then for secretary.
okay. All right. So I guess we'll get straight to business here. The next order is going to be approving and nominating a vice chair. As far as nominations for vice chair, I'd like to start by having David Nix as vice chair.
I accept your nomination. I'd like to nominate Teresa Spicer. Would you be willing to serve?
I'm going to decline that, Gary, thank you.
Are there any other nominations? I guess we call for a vote then for David Nix as vice chair.
5.
And opposed? 1. All right, so David Nix is vice chair. And then, is there a secretary that we need to do as well?
Yeah, you're all welcome to.
We are nominating you
Yes.
for secretary. All in favor? Aye.
You didn't ask if anybody wanted to make a nomination.
Did anybody else want to make a nomination? For anyone up here?
If you want to accept it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the election of officers has been done. Before we get to the approval of the meeting calendar, I want to say thank you to Frankie Pearson for his service over the last years. He said 8 years. That's shocking and surprising. I didn't realize he had been on that long. I appreciate his service, everyone's service up here. It is a thankless job, but we do want to thank him. I also want to say thank you to Mr. Root for all the things that he has done, come to listen to our meetings, and been just a tremendous advisor to us and to the county. We understand that tomorrow is your last day. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Well, thank you so much. Again, yours is a thankless job as well. So thank you for that. Unless there's anyone else that wants to say anything, let's get to this meeting calendar for this year. So looking at the next page on that calendar, I did have a couple of questions. We've got the 15th, obviously, is Martin Luther King holiday. Did we want to try to meet on Thursday, the 18th?
This room is not available on the 18th. That's
Okay.
just why it was removed.
So it's just
And then
removed altogether,
the,
okay?
There are 2 additional dates that were removed that would have preliminary been on your agenda as well. The first meeting for June.
That's
and
June
second
3rd.
meeting for October, which, early voting will be taking place in this room, and there will not be any of the board and commission meetings during early voting.
So no 6-3, I was wondering about that, and then no 10-21.
Correct.
Was wondering about that as well. What about the, obviously Labor Day there is the 2nd in September. Do we want to meet on Thursday the 5th as the
It's
alternate
listed.
day?
It's on there.
It's on.
It is on there, okay. I mean, as long as we're willing to do all these dates, then are all these dates satisfactory to everyone?
I make a motion to approve the calendar as written, as proposed.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Say unanimous?
Yes. I believe it was.
Well, you didn't ask for discussion. I just want to say, a reminder is that we could possibly change these dates as we go through the year.
That is very true. All right, so now we're to the approval of the minutes for December 18th. And we had a chance to review those. Can I hear someone make a motion to approve?
I move to approve minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, we are to a public comment for non-agenda items.
We have nobody signed up.
We have nobody signed up from that. All right, so what about commission member comments? Yes, Mr. Nix.
I just want to thank Frankie for his service. 7 or 8 years, that's a long time to be on this commission. It means a lot to the county for people to give that much service, so thank you, Frankie. That's all.
Do we have any other comments from, yes, sir?
I'd just like to say, it's being a new year and our new chair, that I hope that we can kind of comb in on what it is we hope to accomplish this year early in the end of the year, so that we can get our objectives ahead of us and be focusing on those objectives. And besides the comp plan, I do feel, that we need to continue discussions throughout the year, as long as it takes to get the quality development standards and development regulations, so that, we can do a better job within the community of controlling growth. And then a much closer relationship with the OJRSA. I think it'd be really great if we could get possibly a quarterly report from them, so that we can kind of keep an eye on where development is most likely to occur in the future. And, there's other entities which I won't go into, but, there's a lot of other agencies within our county, and also department heads within the administration of the county that we can ask to come in and give us information. I think we really need to look at possibly looking at those opportunities a little closer, and be a little bit more forthright with getting more information in. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I would just like to say thank you for putting me in this position, I guess.
About time.
It is about time that I do this. I have avoided it for years and years and years. Please bear with me as I stumble through the first few meetings on getting this underway, but I do fully expect that we're going to have a terrific year of really outlining objectives, as Mr. Gollan said, and taking those objectives on. So please call me with any questions, any advice, any recommendations as to what you all would like to see as we move forward. All right, so let's get to staff comments.
Nothing for you this evening.
So getting into our topic on item number 10, we had a special meeting to try to get a handle around what development standards look like for Oconee County moving forward. And we came up with 4 different conceptual kind of big discussion items. And we had asked Mr. Root to come and kind of help us with those. One, to see if in fact we're completely barking up the wrong tree, that this is not possible. We can nix that right off the bat. Or if these are possible, but not easily because of the way our county ordinances are set up, and so on. But just quickly going through those, one was what we had defined as the floating zone, which we had originally talked to you about some time back, where we would have trigger points on a set acreage amount. It was discussed by Mr. Nix, a 30-acre trigger point, that if a developer came in, said, we want to do a development on this 30-plus acre tract, and we are having at least 2 houses per acre, that it would trigger a change from wherever they were. Let me back up. It would trigger a change that if they were not currently zoned, if they were in a control-free district, that it would put them into a residential zoning or a most fitting zoning. So we had that as one item that we brought back to the table. We also had something that I had talked about, that under all the different zoning criteria, one thing that is in there is that there is a minimum width of the lot of at least 80 feet for residential. There is a commercial application at 70 feet, but for residential, it was 80 feet or larger. And we thought that, okay, if we came in and were able to plug in an 80-foot width into the control-free residential category, that we wouldn't necessarily need to roll someone into residential when a developer came in. They would automatically at least be meeting that one minimum standard, which would help control a little level of density. But we wanted to find out the legality and the possibility there, because it would still allow control-free uses just as they currently are outside the matrix. Then we had the performance standards that Brett had mentioned of, let's just go back and revisit the old performance standards and see if we can bring some of those back into some sort of new criteria of saying, here's what we're going to require developers to do, and they follow these rules, here's your box of goodies. And then the last one was just the Pickens County, this straight zoning across the board, and just bite the bullet and everybody gets zoned into some category. So those were the 4 items that we came up with for discussion. And now we would like to kind of turn the stage to you.
Absolutely. And if I could, just do kind of a preliminary, prefatory, or a remark to kick us off. Y'all have a copy of the South Carolina Association of Counties Guide to Land Use. What's it called? Land Use Planning for South Carolina. Have y'all received a copy of this?
Not lately, no.
Okay. We should get one to you soon. I'm sure James is taking notes to get you a copy of this. This document is, it's 182 pages. A lot of it are just appendices in the end of the document, so they're not going to be altogether relevant to what you're looking at. But the meat of it is not terribly long, and it covers most of the questions, certainly questions you've talked about here, and other things that y'all are going to come up with or think about. I would just urge you to take a look at it, and the more you study that document, the more it's going to enable y'all to kind of get on a good linear path with what you want to do. And along those lines, and this is not any kind of negative comment, because like I said, you have a difficult task. I just want to read what I think is a really good, succinct statement of the purpose of planning out of this same land use guide. All right. So planning usually means activities to prepare and organize for the future. Planning can be defined as the process used by local governments to. So getting this linear notion is what I'm going to just kind of throw, because I may be lingering around the hallways after tonight's meeting. I don't know how that's gonna play out. If I'm not, if you could take this with you, it would be great. It's on page 1 of the document. Identify local problems and needs. Collect information and facts necessary to study those local problems and needs. Arrive at a consensus on the local goals and objectives. Develop plans and programs for fulfilling the adopted goals and objectives, and utilize available powers to execute plans and programs in an efficient and organized manner. Because I think this dovetails with what Mr. Gollum was saying. Bring in the resources you need, but in a way so you don't feel like every meeting you're kind of starting from scratch or a couple steps back. If you follow this, again, it's on page 1, what is land use planning? This linear approach where it's documented step by step. This is the exact nature of the problem. If it's talking about these large subdivisions, as specific as you can drill down to that, the better. Then you collect all the information so you know exactly what is on the ground. Is this how much of a problem is it? In what particulars, in what areas, what's potentially coming this way? And then arriving at a consensus on what you want to do for your goals. Essentially what you've been doing, but at the meetings I've been at where it feels like, well, you had a lot that you discussed but didn't come away with anything, is it felt like you're going around, jumping, from item 1, hey, we got this issue, let's talk about this is the way to fix it, and you haven't really fleshed out what that issue is, or the factual components of it. This is just not an admonition, but just something to keep in mind. I think will be helpful if you can get it the more linear, the better. So the first question goes to what you said last, was the zoning issue. It's done. So the county was zoned, the whole county was zoned at one time. So the whole county has been zoned, control-free, although it's, the nomenclature wording, I think it's not zoned, but that is the initial zoning district for everything in the county. So the whole county's been zoned. And then obviously we got the myriad zoning districts that can be applied for and have been applied for rezoning into those. So as far as legal ramifications, that is done. If you're talking about just a purely Pickens County model where you're just gonna undo what has been done, separate the county into whatever quadrants or how many ever districts you think are applicable and have these obligations binding upon whoever lives there, it can be done. Very difficult to put all the toothpaste back in the tube that's come out so far. So essentially the answer is yes, not from a legal perspective necessarily, just from a practical perspective. From my experience, I think that's going to be a tremendously difficult proposition, something to push through, and obviously it's going to create a lot of upset folks. And that's one of y'all's jobs, is to be kind of the citizen advisory board to council. So you're passing along what the citizens do, and that's part of it, is gathering the information to see who would be up for this as best you can. So yes, it can be done. The legal ramifications are more of the practical sense. You're going to have a lot of people that are vested in particular uses and rights that are not going to carry over. And just a lot of things to essentially untangle if you're recreating it in full. How many issues and lawsuits are going to spring out of that? I don't know. But there will be some. But if you've gone through that process and you think, hey, this is what we need to do based on our capturing of the issue, how we've articulated the issue and the data we've gathered, including what's going on now with our county and then other counties that have good models, and you want to implement that, then you go at it. But just, my thinking is, if you're going to shoot that out as an idea and maybe we'll think about it, you're not going to get much traction until you do that linear path. And my own advice is I would not go this route, but it's not because it's unlawful. It would have to be very delicately, surgically done, and you're going to end up with a very just a patchwork situation across the county. Probably not functional. Because you have a good paradigm in place with the zoning districts. It's just nobody is necessarily, not a lot of people are stepping up to be rezoned, and council is not going to do what's called top-down zoning, although they do approve some that would essentially be top down.
So going backwards up my list there, the next one was, going back up, was the performance standards. There used to be performance standards, then we created the matrix, and we pulled things in differently. Were you here, or do you remember us revamping the performance standards process?
No. Chapter 38, the zoning ordinance or zoning chapter was in place when I got here. There have been the migration of some things from chapter 32 to chapter 38. There have been the modification of some things in chapter 32, not a great deal. But as Mr. Markovich articulated during the last meeting, chapter 32 did seem like it was going the direction of being kind of a unified, comprehensive development ordinance that would cover, zoning and subdivision regulations, et cetera. And then chapter 38 came along, and it's fine, but it's essentially very, rifle focused on zoning. Merging those two can be difficult sometimes, but it's happened. And so my wish is, I told Tom at the outset, I wish they had just had, combined this and made one, cohesive, unified development ordinance. It wasn't done, so you got to merge the two. But there's overlap, so that's just something to be mindful of. As far as creating additional items within the performance standards, it depends on what, certainly. So it's not, I don't think you're trying to do this, but it's not a means to work in something that is a zoning action, but do it in chapter 32 so it doesn't sound or look as bad.
So
Not
if
saying
we,
you're doing that, but that could be a temptation.
if we determine then things like under or identifying, if we say, okay, we want more trees or a higher percentage of green space, that would be something that we could work into 32. Things like that, but something that dealt with roads, that would obviously go back to roads and bridges. Something that dealt with setbacks and things of that nature, that would stay in zoning.
The land use kind of parameters, things that, like this truly falls in, land use subdivision development, performance type standards, are things that are along the lines of encouraging development of economically sound and stable municipalities and counties. So the interaction, how's it going to interact with the various jurisdiction, ensuring streets and utilities, et cetera, are laid out properly and are functional. So that's a chapter 26 deal, but it is a land use performance standard item, really. And I think chapter 26 was in chapter 32 at one point. And to ensure adequate provision for safe and efficient travel, circulation, pedestrian and vehicle, ensure the need of provision, or sure open public spaces are provided for, building sites and new land developments are reserved properly for recreational, educational, transportation, and other public purposes, and generally to ensure the wise development of new areas. All those, I read all those just to underscore the fact that those are not what you customarily think of as zoning, and I can go over those later, the objects and the purposes of zoning. But yeah, you can add to those, just, you're not gonna be able to do it in a way that you put a zoning provision in there, not go through the zoning, amending the zoning regulation, procedure that we have. Is that responsive?
That is, it actually segues into my next statement as we move back up the list. The proposal that was there to say, okay, let's take an element within zoning and see about changing that element, which we were discussing in control free, that it doesn't have a lot width. And we said, okay, what if we put a lot width in there to make it like all of the other zoning criteria, whatever we called it, whether we said it was 80 feet or some footage, is that legally possible?
It is. It's not as severe as the notion of just doing, we're gonna rezone the whole county and just do like this. But it is kind of similar, I suppose, but it is certainly doable, allowable. It is a zoning act, so all of these control-free parcels, it's gonna be onerous for notification and other purposes, but that's not relevant. It'll have to go through just as if it was one rezoning or one amendment to the lake overlay or something like that, but it's gonna be obviously much more robust. But it can be done. Certainly, places are gonna be grandfathered in again and have non-conforming things, but you might wanna change Control Free's name
for
To support.
whatever we take on may be a robust
Yeah, I
undertaking
think
to
you're-
begin
I think
with.
it's
So
accurate.
we're just trying to figure out what our possibilities even exist.
That is a possibility.
And then if you would, the last one, and I apologize, you had come in and talked to us at one time about this already, but we wanted to revisit it. It was creating a trigger point that would take somebody that is a developer currently going into a control-free, and when they submit their proposal to planning, that based on what they were submitting, could in fact automatically put them under the criteria of an existing other zoning, traditional rural, residential, some other category that is most fitting, but pulling them out of control-free at that point.
Yeah.
And what was the negative of doing that?
And it wasn't shooting it down necessarily. It's doable to do it that, and there's a number of different approaches to get to that goal. The preliminary issues, though, the trigger issues were the why. That was that question. Why do this? Why this acreage? Why whatever density you're going to allow at that point in time? So just having that so you can articulate between the different classes that are going to be involved was the key aspect. And then the other negative that I saw wasn't a legal issue, but it was just a matter of, as I understood it, the issue was trying to veer away from these sprawling developments and urban sprawl, what have you, and that would, ostensibly, I guess, could do it. That was my concern, I guess, if you're trying to, I don't know. That was a concern that I have. I recall having the concern about it, just being a sprawl creating.
I think Mr. Golan had kind of brought up a real good point about us getting involved with the OJRSA. Because I think that's where that urban sprawl is going to happen, is first and foremost along the sewer lines. And so I do think that relationship needs to really continue to be enhanced. But outside of those sewer areas, which is going to happen anyway, is there any other legal reason why we couldn't adopt some things that if somebody's just coming out off the 85 corridor and buying up 70 acres and about to do a project, that we couldn't put them under a different zoning criteria at the moment that they applied?
Yeah, you can. Obviously, you would have to be consistent with the comp plan, which is probably the most difficult aspect of this, because you're going to require a zoning district. Residential is probably going to fit most places, but you're going to have that drop down on the developer not knowing where the property is going to be at the time the ordinance is written. So that could be problematic, but no, it's doable, and there's a number of different ways to approach it. The floating zone, it could be coupled with the control-free. If you're going to increase lot size, increase width, you can have essentially, like it's consistent with the other question about incentives. You could have areas or say, hey, developer, if you buy here, build here, our density is going to be less. I mean, you're going to be able to build a higher density, width lots are going to be smaller, so you can
You can
do
get
it
some
that
sort
way,
of
but you'd have-
token
right.
credit or whatever that it increases at a percentage or something.
Right. So, but for that to work, you'd have to alter the control-free to make it not appealing to develop within a control-free.
Right.
But that's, like I said, coupled with one of your other suggestions, but it can be done, that way. It could be done simply as, all right, here's the trigger point, developer, you get to X acres, X number of homes. If you are that developer, because the why, you're gonna have to do this by way of, yes, I think it's really akin to kind of a conditional permit, or special exception, kind of. And I'm not real keen on having to have it be a discretionary choice by anybody, but it could be done that way. Like, if you're going to do this, then it's gonna have to be by way of an application, and you have to meet certain criteria, and if you do, then it's approved and they can go forward with the development. Like I said, I'm sure there's probably 10 ways to do it. I can think of 5, but it's doable. But again, the why is the key point for me.
I didn't mean to hog the conversation. I just wanted to kind of get him to answer those 4 points that we brought him in for, but I want to make sure that everybody else gets them.
This would probably be a really broad answer to the reason why, but, is there anything that affords for quality of life You know, in other words, what we're trying to do here is provide a good quality of life. That's the reason why we put these restrictions on the land.
1 second. What I was going to do, I thought I had it printed out, was outline the purposes of zoning. You know, and one of that, you know, aesthetics can be a purpose, that's not gonna be something that a lot of people are keen on, but quality of life, anything that relates to the policing powers of the county, which are not law enforcement powers, but the powers that the county has is really pretty broad to ensure the general health, welfare, safety of the county citizens and the betterment of their life. It doesn't have to just be, you know, we're gonna keep you from, you know, physical harm, but you can, you know, we're gonna increase the quality of life by using this zoning technique. And as you'll see in that, the land use guide, there's 8, I think, that are written out in the code, in Title 6, Chapter 29, Section 720, that shows the essentially the permissible zoning types, but then it allows counties to do any other ones that are consistent with this policing power. So it's not a limited role. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it, figuring out those foundational issues so you can build up to that approach is the key part. But yeah, it's definitely doable in a number of different ways.
Great question. Who else has?
Mr. Root,
Yes, ma'am.
can we revisit what you said about this third option, additional development standards removed from zoning? I mean, the way that it was prevented was, let's go back 25 years and have those zones apply here and have nothing else.
I don't understand what you just said. I'm sorry. That was a question?
So remove standards from zoning. Go back 25 years to whatever standards was in place then and make them apply now.
No, I didn't read the question that way. As I understood the question was, and that's why I put in the comment about, you know, this is not a means or a mechanism to subvert the zoning requirements and put it in performance standards. As I understood it, the notion was this have something that applies more ubiquitously, it's not in the zoning category, removed from the zoning provisions, and instead in Chapter 32, not undoing all the zoning provisions. And maybe I read that question wrong, but I think that's the way
I
I
understood
heard
it to
it.
remove the zoning provisions and go back to very little zoning of 25 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That wasn't
Watch the
it?
movie
That wasn't
twice.
it at all.
I don't think that was the intent.
No,
Could somebody rephrase it for me?
it was to bring some standards back into,
That were around 25 years ago?
that were around. We used to have standards in the county where you could only do this, and this. It wasn't a zoning thing, it was just the standards, period. If you wanted an exception to it, you had to go in front of somebody, or the application process took care of exceptions towards it. What they did was eliminated all those standards and didn't bring anything along with it when they did zoning. So we lost all those standards where all these high density neighborhoods were covered under those standards because you could only put so many houses per acre.
It did have, and I know I gave you one ordinance of the old performance standards, which is amended over time. I don't know if y'all have yet received the previous performance standards. So that outlines what was done. It can be reworked to capture some of those things without taking away really anything in the zoning. The thing that comes to mind first was the 0.58 acre lot limitation. That was, you know, countywide, and that was in place when I got here, and the planning commission said, hey, you know, we don't need this anymore, let's do away with it. It's covered over in the zoning chapters for the different districts, and so that was done. But yeah, it certainly can be, and I think that's kind of consistent with what we were talking about, in my mind at least, on what you wanted to do in the performance standards. But because we have a county that's zoned, again, it's not a way to sneak in, it's not the right word, but put in something that's truly a zoning action within Chapter 32 and slide it on by. In other words, there's going to be a time when y'all do this that you have to start taking bites of this elephant that you're just going to, it's gonna be not fun. You're gonna have to just face the public, and no matter what side you're on, you're gonna have people that are very, all their heart opposed to it. So that's a matter of getting that public input and getting as much buy-in on the front end would be my recommendation as you can. And I know it's hard to get public participation sometimes, but I think this one, zoning, grabs people's interest wherever you are. So,
I had a question, Mr. Root.
yes, sir.
So you're defining things as zoning actions and some things not. So if we put something in chapter 32, for example, it says, no matter what zoning category you're in, minimum acreage on per lot is 0.58 acres. Is that a zoning action? And if so, why? Why do you call it that?
Well, because density and lot sizes fall within what I was just reading to you about, I'll just read it out.
So essentially, we removed all the zoning actions that applied to control free when we gutted the old chapter 32. And we created the new zoning categories.
Yeah, I think that's what I was doing a poor job of articulating there was zoning essentially in chapter 32 in a way, in a loose context. It's not
Zoning actions.
Not necessarily this district has this use requirements and this one has the other, but they were under this, again, section 720 in Title VI. These are the things that can be governed in zoning districts: the use of buildings, structures, and land, the size, location, height, bulk, orientation, etc., of buildings and other structures, the density of development, use or occupation or occupancy of buildings, the areas and dimensions of land, water, airspace that are going to be occupied by buildings, and the size of yards, courts, etc., the amount of off-street parking, other aspects of site plans, not limited to tree preservation, landscaping, buffers, etc. Those are areas that fall within the zoning rubric, I guess. Which doesn't mean that it's unlawful that you have something that is zoning related in chapter 32. It just means you have to follow the procedures to implement it. Just a public hearing notice is not terribly difficult hurdles to jump over, but you'll have to do those. And again, that's something that we'll have to get public buy-in or at least involvement in. Yeah.
Is there any more discussion on this topic right now with Mr. Root? So obviously, this is something that we need to deal with this year in some capacity. I do think that we need to work with county council to find out what county council, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to have to get this sold to the public to the degree that they're willing to bring this forward. And would they like us to try to come up with simply some development standards to plug into 32 that create green space or create some level of whatever we might do to try to lighten the density? Or if we're actually going to go into this zoning criteria, whether that's in the control free or whether that's in some other zoning mechanism. But I think we need to ask council, are they willing to do this? Because I don't want to go through our process of, say, what we did with junkyards and go through it for months and months and months and then not have anything come of it at the end. We've got other projects that we definitely need to be working on, such as the comp plan update. So I think that that's our next step, is to get back to various councilmen and determine where they think their willingness and constituents' willingness to have this conversation at a serious level.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I was just wanting to ask Mr. Root one more question, and that is, if we were to follow a plan where we try to get information from the council. Of course, there's different opinions, but my thinking is if we go to a committee to discuss this, which committee would you suggest we start with?
I would go to the planning committee, yeah, planning economic development.
I just wanted to hear it from you.
Okay. That sounded like a trap, but I'll
Here's another trap for you. I
Yes,
got
I'm
another
joking
question
on that.
for you. If you were us, what would you do?
That's right, that's right.
That's a dangerous one.
True. But I do think if you can go with that step, before you meet with council, is to really say, I know like the Kiwi River property development has been brought up a number of times. They had vested rights, the development agreement has expired, but they're still, I don't know where that stands now, but how many of those really are out there? Having that kind of data, how many could be out there, and that specific step, so you can say, hey, council, this is what the deal is. We're gonna lose the qualities that make Oconee County, if we don't do something. Here's the problem, very specifically, data-driven. Here are our ideas of the solution. Part of getting the problem articulated is, this is what we've gleaned from the public too. And then you take it to council, that may help frame that discussion better. So it gets more traction as opposed to where you get the opinions just bouncing back and forth and then you just leave either upset or confused.
So it sounds like identifying, just like you had mentioned, the sewer corridors, the 130 corridor, and it's not only the Kiwi River project, but you look at, say, the Cliffs Falls South, their corridor to restaurants and to the grocery store is the same 130 corridor, and it's already a development in existence and with a lot of expansion capability there that's already been approved. So it's not like Kiwi River, which has lost a permit and reapplying or something. This is something that's going to be coming down that corridor eventually anyway. So identifying the different corridors may be a next step for us at some point. Unless somebody has something else about this subject, I'd like to end it for the evening.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Yeah.